Are you over 60 and renting and you don't own your own home? Well, join me because I am one of those people as well. And I probably will be renting for the rest of my life. I will not probably purchase another house. And there are various reasons for that. But today I'm going to go into why I'm renting. It's kind of a choice, but not 100% a choice either, which I'll explain a little bit later. But I'm going to go into a few of the positives of renting, the negatives, and also some statistics on how that's growing in our society, the number of older people that find themselves renting in their older years. So join me for this episode. I think you'll find it quite interesting. If you're returning, then welcome back. Really great to see you again. And if you're new here, my name's Leanne. So basically, I've owned 3 houses in my life. About three. And I sold my last home in 2023. I had a mortgage on that home due to various circumstances, which I won't go fully into here. We ended up selling. And I had to clear some debt. I had a fairly big mortgage, so I came out with some money, but I cleared debt because I got myself into a lot of debt with cars, credit, all that kind of stuff. And I go through that in one of my other episodes. But once I cleared that debt, I didn't really have a lot of money to really put towards a deposit at the time. And also I was aware that it's really difficult. I don't know what it's like in the US, but in Australia, it's quite difficult to get a mortgage. And especially at an older age, they look at the longevity and how you can pay that mortgage off over your limited time that you have left, I guess, once you're in your 60s. And so it's really difficult to go back into home ownership, I guess. So I find myself in a situation where I am now renting and probably will be for the rest of my life. There's a lot of things that I really like about renting. I've never been fully attached to owning a home. It's never been something that I really aspired to. Like a lot of people, they need that home base and that comfort of having their own home to be able to do the things that they want to do and things like that. And I've never really been that kind of person. It is really nice, but I also found it quite burdensome when I have owned. I think I have felt quite locked in and sort of stuck in one place, I guess. And I've spent my life growing up and moving around. My father was in the Air Force, so I've moved around quite a bit. So I've got a bit of a gypsy soul in me, I guess. And the thought of living in one place for a long time has never really appealed to me. So I think the thought of owning a house and that's where you stay for 20 years has I've never really been attracted to that at all. However, as I'm getting older and I realise that I'm at the mercy of landlords, that's a little bit concerning. Like I am aware that that can be an issue down the track. Also, I guess rent. Here in Australia, for example, the rents have gone through the roof, so it's really expensive. So my rent at the moment probably eats into about 40% of my salary each week, which is quite a lot. They say you should keep it around 30%, so mine's sitting up around 40. Also, to buy into housing here now, we're probably one of the most expensive countries in the world to buy housing at the moment. So the median house price for where I live in South Australia, I think it's gone up to about $1.1 or $1.2 million. So that is just way out of my price range. I could get a little flat or something like that, but even then, it's very difficult. So my life now is about renting. I'm currently living in a gorgeous little 2-bedroom little unit. There's only 2 of us on the block, and it's really cute. It's quite old, but it's got a lovely courtyard, and it's big enough for me where I don't have to. It's not a big place to keep clean. It's so easy. And it's just fine for me. It's long term, so I can stay here for quite a while. My landlord's really easy to get along with. She's come over and we've talked about gardens and anything that I need planted or, things like that. If I want to put pictures on the wall, paintings on the wall, she said I could do that. So that's really nice. So I guess the positive things that I like about renting is the fact that it can be, you can choose your area where you want to live. So where I'm living is surrounded by beautiful houses. It's a really lovely area, lots of tree-lined streets. Probably, you'd be looking at easily $1.5 million for a house around here. I couldn't afford to buy in this area. There's no way, even if I wanted to buy again, that this isn't an area that I could afford to live because it's a little bit more of a, upmarket, a little bit more of an upmarket area, I guess, slightly. So because I'm renting, I can actually afford to rent in this area, which is really nice. If I was to buy, I'd probably be further out. I could be in an area that I don't particularly like just to get into the market. So I really like the fact that I can walk around here and there's beautiful tree-lined streets. I'm surrounded by lovely houses and it's a really nice, quiet area. It's not rough, obviously because of the type of people that live here. So I really like that's one thing I like about renting. I can choose my areas. If it doesn't suit me, I can, finish my rent. I can go and rent elsewhere. If I choose to, when I'm over living here, maybe in a couple of years, I might get tired of this area. I can then move down to the beach and rent down by the sea. So it's really nice. I really like to know that I can sort of move around and do that type of thing. The other thing that I really like is that I don't have to worry about maintenance. So one thing that happened, for example, was my hot water service went on the blink and you'd be having a shower and all of a sudden it would go cold. And so mid-shower, you have to turn the shower off, run outside, just out the back door, flick the switch, reset it and come back in again. And I rang my landlord, told them, they organised for another hot water service to be installed. All the work that's done there didn't cost me anything. So, things like that, all of the maintenance to do with the house. I've just had a tree cut down that was just, it was a big palm tree and it kept dropping all its big fronds everywhere. It was really, really messy. And they've just gotten rid of that because it's just the upkeep of that's just crazily expensive. So, and they also trimmed another tree that was going into my TV aerial on the roof and getting entangled in that. So all of these things, they had to get a tree guy over. That would have cost quite a few $100s to have all of that maintenance done on the tree outside. And I didn't have to pay a cent for any of that, but I got that work done. So I really, really like that side of it. I come here, there's no stress about the house. If anything goes wrong, I just contact my landlord. Hey, this needs fixing, that needs fixing, and they are obligated to have those things fixed. The other thing that I really like is that I'm not paying insurance, I'm not paying rates, and rates are quite expensive here in Australia. And so all of these taxes and rates and things like that, I don't have to worry about. So it's really nice to just have that peace of mind. I come and go. It's just, I don't have to worry about anything. And then when I get over it, I can move somewhere else. So they're the things that I really like about renting. I do like to have a life where I have a stress-free, the responsibility for the upkeep of the house isn't there. Because as you know, if you've owned a house, if you don't keep doing that maintenance, and it might be gutters, and that's another thing, they had the gutters replaced just recently, and that's quite an expensive thing to have done. So all of that upkeep, and when I had my last house, it was a big house and our gutters were starting to rust. The garden was really high maintenance. There was all sorts of things. We ended up with a leak in the ceiling, and we ended up with a hole in the roof with black mould, and we had to get all the ceiling fixed. There was all sorts of things that we needed to have done. The ducted air conditioner went on the blink, so we had to have that fixed as well. All of this stuff, it's thousands of dollars, and the upkeep, and I just remember thinking that this is just crazy, just all the money that you're paying out. We had a new hot water service installed as well in my last house. So all these things over like a 10-year period, it's all expense, and they're the things that I love not having to worry about. I don't want to have to deal with that, and it is a big cost to you. So they're the things that I like about renting. It really suits me. I don't know where I'm going to live. I might move interstate. Who knows? I like to have a bit more of a transient life. So renting does suit me. The things that I do, I guess, that concern me a little bit about renting is you can all of a sudden be told that they're going to put the place on the market, or they're not going to renew your lease, and you have to all of a sudden find somewhere else to live really quickly, or you do get a bit of time, but you might be really happy to want to just sort of settle down in one place for a few years just to stay put, and then all of a sudden you have to pack up and move again, and you're at the mercy of that. You don't have that choice if your landlord decides that they want to sell. So that's one thing that it's not a massive thing. I'm not overly concerned about that, but it's something that I keep in mind. The other thing is, maybe just reminded me of it, is they do 3 monthly inspections. So you've got someone walking through the house, they knock on the door, comes through, they take photos of everything, and they do that every 3 months. So it's a little bit of an intrusion. I understand it. It's part of renting. It's how they keep on top of things, because I think there's some nightmare stories about tenants who have just totally trashed places. So I can understand, they've got a big responsibility to their client. So I understand that they want to really keep on top of that. But it was quite interesting because this young girl came over the other day, and I was home. I'd had a day off. I was looking after my sick dog at the time, and the place was spotless. I'm pretty proud, house proud, and I do treat a rental property like it's my own house. And I think once you've owned your own house, you do understand that, so you want to keep it really nice. But I hadn't had a chance to clean the ceiling fan in my bedroom, so there was a layer of dust. It wasn't massive, but there was dust on there. And she took a photo of that. And as she came out, I said, "Oh, how did everything go?" And she said, "Oh, there's just a little bit of dust on the fan that needs cleaning." And I just sort of thought, the place is spotless. My dog's sick. I haven't had a chance to clean that. And I said that to her. And she said, "Oh, we had to take a photo of it because that's the sort of things they tell us to take photos of and keep an eye out for." So I was a little bit offended because I thought, well, you can clearly see that this house is spotless. You opened the oven is just spotless. The stovetop's spotless. Everything's clean. I guess if something annoyed me, that would be one little thing that I got a little bit annoyed about. But other than that, it didn't really bother me, and I can understand that they've got to come and do that every 3 months. So that's not a big issue. I can live with that. The other thing is, I guess, you can't just go crazy putting pictures on the wall, or just, banging nails into the wall to hang things on, pictures on. So you've got to be really mindful of that. Anything that you do, you have to reinstate once you leave. And so you're very limited with how you can decorate. So it just means that you have to be a little bit more creative. It comes in with your decor and what you have in the house. Because you can't sort of start painting walls and hanging different curtains up and light shades and all that kind of thing. You're limited there. The other thing is it can be hard to get a place if you have a pet. And when I was looking, I had my dog with me, and I applied for a few places that I didn't get. Luckily, they weren't too concerned about me having a dog here. They were quite happy, which was so lovely. But and also in Australia now, they're not allowed to advertise. If they're advertising a place to rent, they're not allowed to actually say no dogs. I don't know why. It was some law that came in just recently. So they don't say dogs are not allowed. So you can still apply even though you've got a dog, but you just don't know that they actually don't want you to have a dog. So you apply for all these places, not knowing that the landlord doesn't actually want you to have a dog. They're just not allowed to state that. So it's a little bit annoying. I would rather see them state, no dogs allowed in this place, then I wouldn't apply, go through all that trouble of applying, because it is a bit of an effort. Filling out all these application forms, you've got to write a bit about yourself. So you sort of have to do like a bio about yourself, your lifestyle, all that kind of stuff, so they get an idea of who you are and what you're like. And I would rather not waste my time if they already know that they don't want you to have a dog. But I don't know why this law was passed, but it makes it harder for us who have dogs. So that can be really limiting if you've got a dog, because a lot of places, majority of places don't want you to have a dog. I don't know what it's like overseas, but in Australia, and especially in South Australia, it's a real thing. Whereas most people have a dog, majority of people have a dog, so it should be something that is just accepted, I think. But anyway, it's not up to me; it's up to the landlords. So that can make it a bit tricky. The other thing that is you have to kind of consider as us older people as we age and we're going to be renting is also mobility. So if you find that there's sort of issues with your mobility as you're getting older, a lot of places aren't set up for mobility. So you might need grab rails and things like that, or not so many steps or a ramp or whatever you might need to be able to assist you in your older age. If you're renting, a lot of these rental places wouldn't necessarily have that set up for you, so it might be tricky getting around if that is you and you're in that category. Whereas if you own your own home, you can have those grab rails installed and you could modify your house so that you're able to still live there and be able to get around and move around. So that's also something to consider if we're renting in our older age. The other thing is, how do you pay rent? Because here in Australia, we get the pension. I think at the moment it's about $450 or maybe over $450, almost $500 a week. And if you're paying rent, like my rent here is $520 a week. And this is a really modest little unit, only 2-bedroom. It's tiny. It's really cute, but it's not big. And that's $520 a week. So that would be, you get a bit of rent relief once you get your pension, but I think the maximum is something like $110 a week. So even if this was $520 with $110 off, it would still basically take up my whole pension. So it doesn't allow for food, bills, all that kind of stuff. Very, very minimal amount for that. So it's something to really consider. And once you go into a place where you're only paying, say, for example, $400 to maybe $450 a week, they're not very nice. They're usually flats. It might be a 2-story flat or a 3-story flat. The demographic can sometimes not be that nice, the type of people living in these places. And it's probably not a type of place that I would want to live. It could be unsafe. I don't know. So that kind of puts me off a little bit. So it's just, it's definitely something to consider as we get older. And I think that you need to have a little bit of a plan about what you're going to do. And that's why I'm going to work for as long as I can, because while I'm earning money, I can afford to live in a place where I am now. And also while I'm earning money, I'm having money put into superannuation, so that's building all the time. And that in America is like your 401k, except in Australia it's compulsory. It's taken out of our pay, it's part of our salary, and our employer invests into our superannuation. So the longer you can do that, the more you can plan and sort of get yourself in a lot better position to, once you're on the pension, to be able to pay your rent and sort of contribute towards that. So it's not just your pension, you might, you've got more money to go towards that. So that's my plan for now, is while I'm renting, that's fine. I'm building up my super, I'm investing. And I think it's something that we do have to think about for all of you renting out there. We really do have to think a little bit about how we're going to manage that as we get older, because it will be an issue at some stage paying these rental fees. And it's really annoying because I think with the pension here, they don't take into account the fact that some people will be renting in their retired years as they're older. They expect us to own our own home, and they don't take into account divorce, loss of work, things that happen throughout our life that may change that. We're not just all get married young, stay married forever, build your house together and have this life together. Things are so different these days. So there's broken families where people lose out in divorces or whatever, but it's so different. And I think that the way they think is just so old-fashioned, because it's just not the case these days. And so this expectation that the pension is based on the expectation that you own your house in retirement. You've paid it off and you own it, so therefore that's all you need to live on per week is that $450 to $500 a week, and you can do that because you've paid off your house. It's just so not the case anymore, and I think that the whole thing needs an overhaul because there are a lot of people out there that aren't in that situation, and so it makes it very, very difficult, and I think it will throw a lot of the elderly people into poverty. You know, they can't afford to run their heaters in winter, living on baked beans, and just it's really bad. So I'm acutely aware of that, and I am working towards not being in that position. And I'm doing okay, like with my investments and with work and with super, I will be okay. I won't be fantastic, but I'll be okay. And you never know, I've got years still of work ahead of me and I enjoy it. So during that time, I will do as much as I can to get myself into a better position by the time I do eventually retire. So I'll share some stats with you. So I just have to look at my phone because I downloaded them on my phone. But it's quite interesting. Where are we? And I actually thought it would be more, but I thought there'd be more people renting, but at this stage there's not. So this is from 2021 data. So I don't know what the data is now in 2025. I couldn't find that. So I'm sort of basing it on 2021. So in Australia, for those aged 60 to 64 years old, around 28.4% rent their home. Older people, as you get older, the rental share declines. So 65 to 69, 22% of people are renting. 70 to 74 years old, 19.6% of people are renting. 75 to 79 years old, 17.6% are renting. And also, let me just have a look. So there's still about 78 to 79% of Australians aged 65 plus own their own home. I don't know whether they own that outright though. It doesn't say. It's a bit deceiving the way they do this because do they still have a mortgage over their home or do they own it outright? I don't know. Anyway, that's what it says. 12% rent privately and 10% live rent-free or in residential care, so aged care. Private renters aged 65 plus face significant poverty risk. 2/3 of retiring renters live in poverty, often paying nearly 30% of their disposable income on rent versus under 10% for mortgage holders. So, and I think that, these are old stats, so I think that it'd be about half. I reckon it would be closer to 50% of their disposable income would be on rent with the rental prices today. It's just crazy. The share of as of 2023, the share of outright owner occupiers among older cohorts, 75 to 79, was 54%, declining slightly in higher age groups. So in the United States, I don't know whether the houses are cheaper over in the States. It seems that you can get sort of quite well-priced houses. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but they seem to be cheaper than here in Australia. I don't know, but really expensive here. So around 79% of Americans aged 65 plus own their own home, leaving roughly 21% as renters. Federal Reserve data indicates that about 83% of adults 60 plus own their home, implying 17% renting. Okay, so that's 60 plus. Historical trends show a decline in home ownership among older adults from about 80% 2 decades ago to around 74% today, especially among those aged 50 to 65. So it just, the Urban Institute projects senior renting, 65 plus, to rise from 22% in 2020 to 27% in 2040. I wouldn't be surprised if that's a higher percentage by 2040. So it's quite interesting, and I think that they say that renting among seniors is expected to rise, especially affecting lower income and minority groups. So it's very, it's quite interesting, and I think that will get higher. But it doesn't mean that things have to be bad. I think that there are challenges with that. And at the moment, because I'm so mobile and I feel young, and I can't imagine myself being 85 and how that will look, and how that will look with me renting. So, but I'm aware of it, but I don't know how that will look. So I'm doing everything I can now to sort of set myself up for that, you know, get my super, which is your 401k, get that as high as I can, because that will definitely help in the long run when I hit that age. And I certainly probably won't be working at the age of 83. In fact, I can say most definitely not. But while I can work, I'm going to do as much as I can. So yeah, renting. I think that there's a stigma around that, and there's such an expectation for people to own their home. And I think for people renting, they shouldn't be ashamed of that at all. It is what it is. We're renters. Life has worked out differently for us, and we're renting. So it's not anything to be ashamed of. It's just how it is. And there are definitely some positives to renting. So it's not all bad. People, you know, there's, I don't know, for me, I like that mobility. I like to be able to move around at the moment and how I feel now. So it suits me. And I'm definitely not ashamed of renting. So there you go. So let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know if you're renting, how you feel about that. Let me know if you're sort of making plans to sort of help yourself with that, knowing that you will be renting down the track when you're older, a lot older, and how you're sort of setting yourself up for that. And just let me know how you feel, the negatives, positives, and that kind of thing. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.